Morgan Wallen, Graveyard Whistling. Let's talk about it. How y'all doing? Welcome to Let's Talk About It, Music Reviews, Season 11. How y'all doing? Welcome to the show. Guys, my voice is a little messed up. Allergy season has hit me pretty hard. You know, we're still trucking along making content, but let me tell y'all something. Morgan Wallen came back making music, you know. He dropped his old album, you know, Am I the Problem? I think that's what it was called. It was like a 3-hour, you know, country extravaganza. I mean, it was like 3 hours long. Almost 4 hours if we're being real, you know, by the time I was listening to that album. So, you know, I've listened to a lot of Morgan Wallen these days. And he's got a new song out called Graveyard Whistling. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Starting off with the instrumental. I'll be real, you know, this instrumental is a little better. You know, this ain't the typical, you know, basic country loop guitar, you know, throw in some drums and kind of call it a day. You know, this one has a little bit more to it, which I do enjoy. You know, I do like how it has more of that kind of guitar, kind of rock feel to it, which sounds pretty good. And I will say, too, you know, you have that kind of rock guitar feel, and I do like how the drums actually do feel, you know, really in-depth, really got some oomph to it. You know, I really do enjoy that. I'm glad the drums got that. And, you know, I do like the little switch-ups with the guitar. That sounds really good in my opinion, you know. And I will say, you know, this instrumental is not too bad. You know, it starts off pretty simple with that guitar, and then it kind of switches to those drums, and then you kind of just, you know, hear all the different elements there, which is pretty good in my opinion. You know, nothing crazy, you know, nothing, you know, that I've heard that really was like, oh shit, you know, this is a fire country instrumental. Like, this one's got switch-ups, you know, this one's got all these different kind of elements. I will say, you know, this is more of that basic kind of rock, kind of country fusion. So I'd say overall, you know, this instrumental is kind of decent. Now, look, let's get into something else, because I will say, you know, the problem with some Morgan Wallen songs, and for some reason, you know, I get the biggest criticism of myself when I talk about this. So let me try to explain this better, because for some reason, I got people always in my comments telling me, you know, oh, Morgan Wallen's vocals, they're not mediocre. This is some of the most passionate country singing I've ever heard. Can I ask y'all something? When you hear somebody whining high pitch, you know, when you hear, you know, let me, you know, bring y'all back to an example of, you know, like a little kid, you know, singing music, you know, and when you have a little kid singing music, you can kind of hear the scratchiness, the higher pitched vocals, no matter if the kid can sing good, you know, no matter if the kid's actually got some talent, you know, if he's a kid, you know, you're going to have whiny vocals. And it's kind of the same thing with Morgan Wallen. You know, I feel like sometimes this man turns his auto-tune settings to full-on robot. And when you turn your auto-tune settings to full-on robot, and you start, you know, trying to do these higher notes, you start trying to hold out your vocals a little bit longer, you really start hearing the whininess, the high-pitchedness of those vocals. And it just gets really annoying to listen to. You know, when I'm hearing a decent hook from Morgan Wallen, and then he goes into, you know, this kind of higher pitch, kind of whiny, you know, a vocal run to, you know, end off the hook, in my opinion, I just don't think that really sounds that good. You know, it kind of sounds annoying. You know, it's like a teacher, you know, scratching at a chalkboard, and your ears are like fucking beaming. They're like wanting to melt off. You know, that's kind of the same feeling I get from this Morgan Wallen hook. And I was really trying to enjoy it, but when you kind of just repeat the same whiny, high-pitched vocals, I mean, honestly, it makes the song really stand out hook-wise. And it doesn't make it stand out good hook-wise. It makes it stand out kind of whatever kind of hook-wise, bad hook-wise, you know. It doesn't make it, you know, sound that good. So I would definitely say, in my opinion, you know, I just don't really enjoy the hook. And that's one of my problems, you know, about this song, is the hook is like copied and pasted throughout this whole entire song, and it's just like, goddamn. Could we record a better hook if we're just going to use the same hook like 3 or 4 times in this 4-minute song? I know Morgan Wallen can sing pretty good. I know this man could, make some pretty good hooks that can get stuck in your head. And then I listen to this and I'm just like, what the fuck am I listening to? And then you got verses that just kind of sound the same. The same style of vocals, the same flow. And it just kind of repeats and it gets monotonous. It gets stuck in this kind of generic, circle of life. Every minute is just the same shit that I've heard from Morgan Wallen. And, I'm not expecting anything groundbreaking, but there's so much you could do to a song to make it sound different from your previous work, to make it sound a little more fresher, a little bit more newer. Maybe adding a fiddle, maybe adding a guitar, adding a guitar solo at the end, actually letting the instrumental really play out. Having some better drums, having some drum switch-ups. This is just the production side. Let's say if I want to, make my vocals stand out a lot more, well, let me layer some background vocals. Let me add some stuff in the background to really get my verse feeling a lot more impact. Let me key change. Let me switch up my vocals at the midpoint of my verse so the audience stays entertained. Let me switch up this hook and, not record in whiny vocals. Let me switch it up and really sing a better hook. You could do all of these little things to make the song a lot better to listen to. And it's not that hard. It's just putting more time into your song. It's adding more elements to make the song stand out more, because the problem with new music in, 2025 and so far is that you're going to have a lot of repeat style songs. You're going to have songs that kind of just feel the same song over and over and over again. But if you can do some small things to make the song its own thing, its own original thing, it makes the song a lot better in my opinion. So that's what I'll definitely say about this song. It's missing something. It's missing all of those things I just said. There's absolutely none of those elements in there. No background vocals at all. Just kind of a whiny hook. And we're kind of relying on this kind of generic instrumental to kind of get us through. It's just like, damn. Can we do a little bit something else? Can we add, a little bit better? Just add a little bit more to the song, in my opinion. It just doesn't need to be that hard. And, I feel like sometimes when I complain about this, people are like, no, the song's not like that. The song's got this. It's got these switch-ups. It's got a better instrumental. It's got better this, better that. And I hear the song and I'm like, yeah, the same 5-second guitar loop, the same style of drums that just kind of repeat and repeat and repeat. Are you telling me that's a lot better than what I'm hearing, in my opinion? I'm just going to be real. It's not that appealing. It's not that good to listen to. It doesn't add anything to the song. And that's kind of what graveyard whistling has. So many generic elements where I'm just like, is there more to this song? Is this song just going to be your basic ass country song? And that's kind of what you get here, which is really disappointing. So overall, Graveyard Whistling, guys, is just going to get like a 5 out of 10. I mean, props to Morgan Wallen, I guess, for, trying a little bit more on the hook. But, I mean, it's like sometimes he tries a little bit more on the hook and then it just sounds terrible. And it's just like, man, I don't even know at this point. I can never pin down what is wrong with Morgan Wallen. Like, when he records music, does he just pick a day where, maybe my voice is going to sound good, and he picks another day to record where his voice just doesn't sound that good? Like, I don't know what's going on in that department. But whatever it is, it made this song not that good in my opinion. So, 5 out of 10, guys. Let me know how y'all feel about this song. Do you love it? Do you hate it? I don't know. Let me know. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your podcast at, make sure you follow, turn on notifications, guys. We're dropping new content every single day. And yeah, guys, I will see y'all later. Have a good one.